Getting nothing but static from Generation Z. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the focus group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the focus group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. Did you get my obscure reference? Generation Z.
B-52s.
Okay, I figured
How
you
obscure
would.
was it, Tim? We're huge fans.
I know, but you'd have to be. Some people aren't. So Channel Z, so Generation Z. I thought I would try to do something. But anyway, in our Shop Talk segment, we've got a story about Gen Z, which I don't know if it's much of a story, and that any new workers into the workplace seem to struggle. But we'll talk about that when we get there. And of course, we've got our banter, our Caught My Eye, our business birthday, and that's that. Thanks to our friends at Deep Discount as well for being a partner of us here. When you go to our website, which is focusgroupradio.com, you'll see the Deep Discount logo. Start shopping away. You'll also find our companion podcast, which is released on Tuesdays, called TFG Unbuttoned. So be sure to give that a listen as well. So, Mr. Nash, how is your upstate and the beautiful leaves changing? Have the leaves changed or the leaves all fallen?
Oh, it depends on what part you're at. Like, there's still a lot of green, but a lot of our leaves are down already. And I did a beautiful bike ride the other day, Saturday, as a matter of fact, and it was sunny and blue sky, and it was just gorgeous. Great fall day. It's been leaf-wise, the colors have been really dramatic because we had very little rain in September, and I think that affects the whole thing.
Yeah, it's been dry, which I think does affect the leaves. My mom in Connecticut's shocked that so many leaves have fallen already.
Oh, well, Tim, we're already into the second week. We don't mean like October's going to be done before you know it. On our building in the city, we're already talking about the kids doing a pumpkin carving, contest. Halloween costumes are being tested as we speak. So it's like, no matter what you do, it's like, I remember having lunch on the patio of the house. We had some friends visiting, and it was a beautiful summer day with a breeze. It was like there were no mosquitoes or anything. And it feels like it was yesterday, but it was actually 5-6 weeks ago. So,
well, and if you think about it, right, it's 2 months to Christmas almost, right?
2 months from now,
from now, you'll be knee deep in Christmas music. Do you play Christmas music a lot around the house?
Bob does. In fact, yes. And I only like Christmas music in January. It's a weird thing. Like during the holidays. Yeah. Then I'm like, oh boy, I love that song.
I shut it off. I'm done. Just 26th, I'm done with Christmas.
Yeah. Well, I think
I'm done with snow. I don't want snow either.
Yeah, I know.
I want snow and everything. I want Thanksgiving to Christmas to just be holiday overload, and then I'm done.
So when we were in Iceland on our little trip at the end of September, we were going by a store and we saw these glass ornaments, like those glass blown ornaments, decorated in a window. And it was Queen Camilla, King Charles. They had Grace Jones. They had Anna Wintour, like this crazy grouping of people. So Bob fell in love with these ornaments, did not want to pay what they were charging in Iceland, did all the detective work, found them on eBay or I think Amazon as well. So we have some new additions to the tree. It's going to be Queen Camilla, King Charles, Prince William, and Kate. And to see them, you'd laugh. They're hysterical.
Are they glass ornaments? Or are they?
They're those like the hollow glass that they that are painted and they have decorated. Total non sequitur. I saw this on the dumpster fire known as Twitter the other day. I think you will laugh at this. Remember back in the day, they used to do this thing called missed connections, where maybe you saw someone and you wanted to. So this is called a missed connection, and the headline is, "You farted in Kroger yesterday." And it was a male seeking women who's 31. "You were the tall brunette with the near-perfect body that farted in the bread section last night. I was the tall guy next to you that looked over and asked, 'Was that you?' You quickly replied, 'No, it wasn't.' You almost seemed insulted, I would ask. As the stink grew, you continued to deny your flatulence, but it was evident. I tried to get rid of the stench by waving 2 loaves of ciabatta bread. You proceeded to storm off in an angry manner. You are beautiful, and even if you are a liar and you fart like a Clydesdale, I'd love to meet up.
My God! First, you'd have to wonder whether she's looking. I wonder if somebody heard me fart in the store.
Well, you have to wonder if it's real, but even if
Yeah.
it's not, it's just a funny, like I waving two ciabatta, like the ciabatta loaves, just that got me. But Kroger's
that's-
too.
Yeah, well, that's you mentioned Grace Jones. Mm-hmm. I was on the YouTube, and she had just done a concert somewhere in England, and thank God for the backup singers. I don't know. I know
What happened?
Well, she's almost 80,
Well,
so the voice is not as strong as it used to be, and I kind of felt a little sorry for her. Like she
Really?
was all in all the big costumes that she wears. She still did, though, I will say. She did slave to the rhythm with the hula hoop the whole time. I mean, here she is pushing 80. And she had that hula hoop going for 7 minutes. But the voice just, she either was phoning it in, or she just wasn't feeling well, or something was going on. But she seemed to be almost a little lost. But not to be outdone by Frankie Valli. I don't know if you've seen all those, where he's just standing there like a cigar store Indian.
or a wax figurine from Madame
And
Tussauds.
his mouth isn't even moving, and the track's going, and the Jersey Boys are behind doing their thing. It's like, do you need the money that bad, or what is going on? But
Well, here's one for you. When was is Marilyn May still singing?
yes, she's at 54 below, right around Thanksgiving, I think.
I would love to see her again because
I would too.
How old is she? She's in her 80s, or is she?
She's 94, 95.
Okay, so if she can carry a tune, right, and I think she probably chooses songs that are more agreeable to her age and her vocal range at this point. But she's a true cabaret singer, right? I mean, I would love to see her again. It was like when we saw Cheetah Rivera.
Yeah.
An amazing show, right?
They say, Annie Lennox talked about this because her, particularly in the 80s, when she did lots of her singing with the Eurythmics, and she really stressed her voice in some ways in terms of her reaching high notes or whatever. And she says she just can't do it anymore, but she does rely on the backup singers to help her reach those notes, and she has changed some of the arrangements of some of those iconic songs to help her.
Favor her voice.
As the voice ages. But somebody like that, you say, oh, okay, you get it. But I still remember, even when you and I saw Cher.
I was in
Vegas,
at the Caesars. This thing was Caesars, yeah.
Which was, she did a great job. But you could, she's another one who's pushing 80.
Yep.
And, she's out of breath. And I'm thinking, God bless them in those heels and outfits and whatever walking. And that's what I thought about Grace Jones. I mean, she was in these stiletto boots and this bustier and the whole deal. And I thought, God bless her. But man, I don't know. Even the B-52s have aged quite a bit. They're in their 70s.
I know.
They're still banging out songs, but you can tell that the voices have gotten a little weaker.
A little rusty.
I guess.
You and I often say that our favorite Vegas act, and when we saw them, they were in their 60s. Was Donnie and Marie? Were they in their late
Donnie
60s?
Marie. 50s, probably.
Okay, and they were right on point. They sounded fantastic, and when Donnie was dancing at one point, you and I looked at it, were like, how old is this guy? He's doing this? We couldn't do it.
Well, it's funny because you had said, I think you made the comment, or maybe it was our friend Andrew, and said that, they were raised like the Jacksons,
Yep.
the Jackson 5. They were raised since little kids to be entertainers, so they know how to command the stage. And they really did. I mean, as campy as parts of it were, made the point of, remember they went down every table and high-fived every person, touched
Anybody
every
who had a
person in
hand
the
up,
audience.
he made a point of saying
And you
hi
said,
to, yeah.
they're entertainers. They understood, that they're entertainers. I just saw a recent we get in the celebrity thing, but a recent interview with Dolly Parton, and they asked her about the upcoming election. And she said, I have no comment. And the interviewer said, well, no, you must have a comment. She says, certainly I do. She goes, I have a comment about everything. And I have a comment about everybody who's running. But I'm not going to tell you because I'm an entertainer. And I learned long ago that as an entertainer, I should keep my mouth shut and just entertain, which I thought was quite interesting.
Did Carson sort of take that route as well? I mean, he made fun of every administration in his monologues, but I don't think he ever really knew how he voted, right?
No, and a lot of those people you didn't. You wouldn't have known with, even they would talk about this with newscasters back in the day. You wouldn't have known where Walter Cronkite stood.
Correct.
Or perhaps where some of the other big anchors stood. Further later on in years, like Dan Rather, certainly I think he was on, when we left, he was on the Andy radio or whatever. I don't even know if that's still around. Is that still on the air?
It is. Yeah, Radio Andy.
All Housewives all the time. Whatever.
It's basically an extension of Bravo, and I don't listen to it, but that's me.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna, unless you watch Housewives. Do you watch Real Housewives?
No, the only Bravo show we actually watch, and I'll admit this and I'll happily talk about it, is Below Decks.
Yeah.
And specifically, we watch a lot of the reruns or the first several seasons when it was Captain Lee or Captain Sandy. But to Bob and I, it's watching young people come to grips with working as a team, being in close quarters, and solving weird problems, and dealing with often really kind of weird guests on the boat. So there's a lot to it that and there's the crap that goes on, but later seasons, they're more aware of what they're doing, and they're more aware that they're on a show. But if you watch like the first 5 or 6 seasons, it's more unique. But that's not the only one we watch.
That's like any of those reality shows. There was just a group on from Rehoboth that I know of as an arm's length that were on this season's of Below Decks ending. And then I believe Captain Sandy, she lives in Telluride.
Yes, yeah.
And of course knows our friend Rosie out there.
Rosie
knows everybody. Yeah. She was hanging out with James Carville a couple weeks ago. They were out there for the Telluride Film Fest, and she was talking about that. But yeah, so I haven't. But I used to watch Bravo quite a bit. I don't anymore. And I used to watch the Hallmark Channel, which I don't much anymore, but only because of Lucy. But now you can get it all on Pluto.
Oh my God, Tim. There have been episodes that pop up that I totally like. The one we just saw the other day was when Lucy decides she has to get a job to pay for a dress that she bought, and she sees an ad with Ethel in the paper for babysitting. Most babysitters were getting 50 cents, but this ad promised $5.
Yeah.
And Ethel's like, there's something wrong with this. And we're howling because it doesn't matter that it was made 70, 80 years ago. It was the twins, the two boys are identical, and they tie her up, and then the woman calls them, have you lit Mrs. Ricardo on fire yet?
Not yet. So, Mr. Nash, what caught your eye this week?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
The article's simple. It's really the headline that always gets me, and that's why it caught my eye. But the headline reads, hacked robot vacuums across the U.S. started yelling slurs.
Love that.
So there is this company called Ecovac. It's sort of a low-end Roomba, I guess. And what happened was a guy in Australia was... the Ecovac's going around. He hears this broken up noise because they have a little speaker on them. And he hears something like a voice or broken up radio. So he goes onto the app for the Ecovac vacuum, which looks like a Roomba. And he sees that someone has accessed the camera feed and the remote control feature and and he's not sure if it's real or not, but he resets the password and reboots the vacuum. It sits quietly for a minute, and then it reboots and it starts going around the room. But now at like volume 10, it's yelling slur words, cusses, and saying like effing, fill in the blank. As it's moving around, it's screaming nasty expletives.
Brilliant.
So it turns out that it was hacked, and he wasn't the only person that got hacked. And he said, "Hey, look, I could have been. I'm lucky that it was this simple. That it was the little Roomba thing or the Ecovac rolling around yelling, cuss words and nasty slurs." And he said, and then he also seems to have gotten a message from the person who hacked it. He thought that was polite of them to let them know it was hacked, but. The article then went into this whole thing about how many appliances in our homes are hooked up to the internet that we don't even think about, that have very, very bad encryption or very weak security that could be easily hacked, and then this could happen. Except this one guy said, hey, he got off easy, because how hard would it have been for them to hack this, listen to things that were going on, use the camera to point at a screen or capture a password being typed in or spoken over the phone or something. So that was it. It was basically someone said at the very end, you get what you pay for, a rock bottom price for a robot vacuum. You maybe get hacked. I don't know if I buy that, but
I think that's kind of funny. I mean, I would kind of have left it if it was so when it's running, it's swearing as it's going around cleaning. It's kind of
nasty. I mean, when I started to read what it was doing, and it was like this slightly robot voice that was doing it, and I was like, wow, I would have laughed as well. But you don't want that thing screeching around all the time, yelling at every time it was on, it would be yelling these slur words. It would be coming out of the speaker.
I never understood the Roomba. I have friends who have them. They, it's kind of the Elon Musk technology of SpaceX, right? It comes back to its little pod. But yeah, but charges up. But I think it's good for maybe picking up dust or some hair, maybe on a wood floor or linoleum floor or something. But I just never understood that it really would clean that well.
My favorite is whenever these Roombas or these robot vacuums come across like dog poop or cat poop.
Oh, I love that. And it drags it all over the house.
And the blades are all covered in crap. And
it shows all the poop streaks around the house. Yeah, that's my favorite too.
Mm-hmm.
So mine caught my eye is a little bit different. The headline is Washington State woman calls 911 after being hounded by 100 raccoons. So this is in a somewhat of a suburb, I would guess, of Seattle. And it's probably not a subway or not a suburb. It's about 90 minutes from Seattle in Kitsap County. And there was a woman there who decided she was going to feed the raccoons in her yard. So she reported.
Oh, how nice, huh?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she had said that there was no law against feeding small critters or animals, but there was a law against feeding cougars and bear and whatever in the county. But she told deputies she ended up having to call 911 because she said she had started feeding this family of raccoons. There's only about 6 of them. She said decades ago. But all of a sudden, in the last 6 weeks, more and more raccoons kept showing up. So I guess they must have said, hey, there's good eating down at, old lady Kitsap's house down there in the county. So she had said that the raccoons started descending on her property, and she calls 911, and the sheriff's office is like, well, this is a nuisance problem of your own making. We can't, what do you want us to do? She wanted them to, she said the raccoons would surround her in her car. She'd come home and they'd all be in the yard and they'd be trying to get at her for food. And then they said they started going to her door. They became aggressive. They were demanding food day and night. They were scratching at the doors at her house, at her screen doors.
Scratching at the can, Tim.
Yeah.
Scratching at the can.
And she said they'd scratched her car up and she was terrified, petrified. So they said to her, they had talked to the wildlife fish and game department in the state of Washington, woman Bridget Meyer. She said that you just have to stop feeding them and hopefully they'll go away. And so eventually the woman did stop feeding them, and little by little the raccoons now are not showing up. And I just laughed because I thought, man, it is funny that she said she'd been feeding them for decades and there were only a couple. And then all of a sudden, imagine having 100 on it. That's a picture, an actual picture of her yard when she came home and all the raccoons waiting for food.
It only takes the one smart one to go back to the group and say, hey, down the block.
Now, we've had an explosion of bunnies down here in Rehoboth Beach. And they were eating all the hostas and the flowers and the plants. Mm-hmm. And so they do not want you. And I was on the Animal Issues Committee when I was a commissioner. You're not supposed to feed any of the wildlife here.
No.
But I went and got some carrots. And so I threw some carrots out so it would stop the bunnies from eating all the flowers and hostas. And it worked. They loved the carrots. And so then we'd have other vegetables that we had bought for salad that we didn't eat, maybe some radishes or celery or something. And they didn't like the radishes. They sampled the celery, but we threw out a couple of pieces of corn on the cob, and I actually caught a couple of the squirrels running across the street with the corn cobs. So they took the corn. The bunnies didn't eat the corn, but they do love the bunnies come now every day like clockwork. Right around 5:15, the bunnies all show up looking for carrots. So Richard even came in the other day and said, you got to go feed the bunnies. They're out there waiting. So I don't know if we're going to be concerned if all of a sudden we have hundreds of bunnies.
Tim, is this This raccoon story, I thought I heard something in the news about this where animal control told the woman that one other option they had was they would remove the raccoons, but it was going to cost $500 per raccoon. Does that sound right?
No, that wasn't in this story, but
Okay.
that probably would make sense. No, they told her that she created this problem herself.
And she
that
just stopped
she
feeding.
needs to take care of it. Yeah. So she needs to stop feeding them, and hopefully they'll disperse, but they're not going to all of a sudden start capturing them for her. They said this was a nuisance of her own making, was what they replied. So, but yeah. Raccoons, I don't know. I haven't seen any raccoons around here. I used to see them at the boathouse in Philly. They would come through and look for fish or whatever down by the water. But do you have any wildlife upstate?
Oh yeah, we got
poking
plenty of
around?
raccoons.
Really?
Groundhogs. Bob is aggressive about. He has these have a heart, so he traps a groundhog and drives it 9 miles away and puts it in a different area. And then he hates possums for some reason, but the possum.
They're the best to have in your yard.
Yes, because they are resistant to ticks. They eat ticks, actually. They're resistant to they eat all kind of bad bugs and stuff like that. And so now I've seen some things pop up online where there'll be a picture of the possum and it will say, "I'm a possum. I'm good for you. Leave me alone."
Well, they're very clean.
Yes,
they're
they
the
are.
cleanest of
Yeah.
any. They groom themselves constantly. You're right. They do eat a lot, up to 5,000 ticks they can eat in a season. They eat snakes, mice, other vermin. And they said it's pretty good. You're good. You're lucky to have a possum in your yard. Lauren will tell you that from Deep Discount. She likes possum.
Once I knew what they did, they're sort of like the clean garbage.
Yeah.
And then another animal that I always think is a little ugly, but they serve a purpose. Turkey vultures. You kind of think they're hawks,
Yeah.
and then
I'm always
but they're-
afraid they're going to get Spike. I'm afraid they're going to get the little dogs.
Well, the hawk would, but not. So the turkey vulture, Mom's husband Jim told me that they are the cleanup crew in the bird world. They will eat. They will so a hawk wants live game. They'll pick up a baby possum, a baby groundhog or something. But the turkey vulture will come along and find like a squirrel that's been hit by a car on the road, and they're the ones that eat the dead meat and get rid of it. So
Carry-on, is that what they call it? Carry-on?
yeah, they're carry-ons. Yeah.
Cleanup crew.
Yeah, cleanup crew.
Well, so two very different
Caught our eyes. Yeah.
caught our eyes today.
An expletive shouting vacuum and a lady who creates a problem with raccoons. That's only on the focus group.
Yeah. So we've got our business birthday today.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
So even though today is October 16th, born yesterday, October 15th in 1917, was Marion O'Brien Donovan. And this came from one of our listeners. I believe this might have come from Howard and Patrick, two listeners of the show.
I love Howard and Patrick. I hope they're doing great.
Yep. So they sent this over. And so Marion O'Brien Donovan, as I said, born October 15th in 1917, died November 4th in 1998 at 81, an American inventor and entrepreneur, and most known for inventing the disposable diaper and creating the disposable diaper. So she was recognized as one of the most prominent female inventors of all time. She actually had over 20 patents by the time she died, but never got recognition until after she died. She died in 1998, but it wasn't until 2015 that people really started recognizing all the inventions that she was involved in. So she was born and raised in Indiana and went off to get a degree in English literature from Rosemont College, which is a small girls' school outside of Philadelphia, and then ended up going to Yale University, where she was one of only 3 women to graduate from architecture class.
One of 3.
One of 3.
Interesting. Yeah.
But interestingly, her mother died at a young age, and so they said her father offhandedly invented "Take Your Daughter to Work Day," because her father had a machine shop.
And couldn't leave her alone, probably.
And couldn't leave her alone, so would bring her into, and she was very fascinated by the complicated machinery. He ran this lathe shop and had some inventions of his own in terms of the new auto industry and also armaments and some of this machinery he had. But she was very interested in how things were put together, how they were made, how they were built, and But funny enough, so she's in the shop all the time, paying attention, seeing what Dad's doing, and ends up getting a job as beauty editor of Vogue magazine, which doesn't seem to fit, right, if any of this.
Not with the shop, right?
But she met a guy who was a leather importer in New York City when she was living there working for Vogue, and they moved out to Westport, Connecticut, and they had 3 children. And so she becomes this housewife in Connecticut, and she got tired, she said, of changing wet crib sheets from the babies, soiling them, and felt that the cloth diapers served more like a wick rather than a sponge. And she said, but they did offer rubber pants at the time, but they were really painful for babies because they would create diaper rash.
And constricting, and they would trap moisture, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So she said this was a problem. She was asked by Barbara Walters, how she came about by inventing this diaper. And she said it was a problem that I believe many mothers shared. And she said the simple question I asked myself was, what can I do to help people? And most certainly help me. And so they said she went and ripped the shower curtain off the hanger in the bathroom, cut it into pieces, sewed it into a waterproof diaper cover, used snaps instead of safety pins, because she said the safety pins were unwieldy at the time and also could poke the babies.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said this led to what she called the diaper cover. She then used all different types of papers and absorbent material to kind of find the right breathable cloth. And she had something similar to a parachute cloth that she used, and ended up making what becomes the disposable diaper. At the time, they called a boater because it looked like a boat, she said. So she had made replicas of the diaper and started making them at home, and went to factory and manufacturer after manufacturer. Nobody had interest. They said it was unnecessary. And she felt it was because it was a male-dominated business and manufacturing and everything.
And the guys aren't changing the diapers, right?
So she said, and all these big-name manufacturers, and this is in the 40s. So in 1949, she ends up going to Saks Fifth Avenue, and they decide they'll buy her, which is odd to me that Saks Fifth Avenue would buy disposable diapers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they bought it, and they became a success. And she was still trying to. She was got more patents in terms of snaps and different materials and whatever, but still could not find anybody that was interested in buying this or making this in some sort of mass volume.
So Tim, if she was at Saks, was she doing like small orders individually somehow? And
yeah, they said that she would. She did well, but she would make them out of her home, and then she was selling them Saks Fifth Avenue in Manhattan.
So even with Saks behind her, she still couldn't find like a volume manufacturer?
No one was interested. Yep. No one was interested to do any of it. They just kept saying it was unnecessary, that, there was plenty. People can use cloth diapers. So she ends up selling the patent to a company called Keko, K-E-K-O, for $1 million, which is about $10 million in today's dollars. And she said she just was up against a wall and no one was interested in this. So she sold it for the $1 million. And that was in 1949. And so it wasn't until 1961, 12 years later, that Procter & Gamble ended up buying the company that originally bought the patent from her. And there was a guy there by the last name Mills who developed what we know now as Pampers. And so Procter & Gamble was responsible for taking her patent and mass producing it, and to this day is what we call Pampers. They said 95% of the babies in the U.S. wear disposable diapers. So they said her consistent goal in life. So she never stopped though after she sold her patent. Between 1951 and 1996, she had 20 other different patents. One called the Big Hang Up, which was like a garment hanger. It was almost like California closets, where she had developed these systems for inside closets in order to hang up more product. She also invented something, a soap dish which drained into the sink so that the soap didn't sit there and get all mushy. Something called the Zippity Doo, which was an elastic cord that connected over the shoulder of the zipper of a dress, so one woman can get dressed by herself without having somebody zip up the dress.
A Zippity Doo. I love it.
Zippity Doo. And something called the dental loop, which she said she watched her husband try to floss his teeth and struggle with the winding. So she came up with this product she called the dental loop to help with flossing teeth. And they said growing up, her daughter Christina said, Mom was always working on something. Our kitchen became her workshop. That she wasn't necessarily cooking food, but it was sealants and glues and all kinds of stuff she was constantly inventing right up until she died in 1998. So
I love Marion O'Brien Donovan might be one of my new favorite people. I mean, you got to love it. Tim, she did everything we've interviewed people about this. See a problem, invent the solution. And the problem could be really simple. Like one of my favorite things you brought up was the draining soap dish.
Yeah.
Like it's so obvious that the water should be moved from the soap to keep it dry. It's brilliant.
No, simple things, right? You're exactly right. And I thought it was a shame too. They said it wasn't until 2015 that she was actually given credit for all of the different patents and different products that she had invented. But not being a woman, of course, right? I guess it would just be horribly frustrating. I mean, there was. I'd like to find the interview with Barbara Walters. I believe they actually did a video documentary of her, and what a struggle it was for people not to take her seriously or think that she had the capability to either invent things or to be head or captain of industry.
And I think it's because of what you just said a moment ago. I maybe we're wrong, but we're probably right. It's because she was a woman.
Yeah, no, she says that. She said she just, and they show her, I don't know, there was a picture, I was going to include it, but she's surrounded. It was almost like that, in Mommy Dearest, where Crawford's sitting at the boardroom table.
It's all men.
It's all men. This is the same
Pepsi
sort of
board.
thing. She's sitting there in the middle of this table with all these men signing over her patent for the diaper and all the plans and the different, I think she had 4 different patents on the diaper, but signing it over to this company for $1 million. Which in 1949, again, I said was $10 million, but it's still not all that much when you consider what the disposable diaper has done. Can you imagine how much money Procter & Gamble's made on and still makes on diapers? On
diapers alone. And of course, the arc of history is fascinating as we move into a more green-aware environment. Like people are wondering, why don't we bring cloth diapers back and the whole cloth service? But the truth is, cloth diapers required massive washing. There was a delivery company that would come and bring your diapers, but it had, so water usage, but I love her, and I'm glad that those guys brought her to your attention because it's a perfect business birthday.
Yeah. So happy birthday to Marion Donovan. Our shop talk this week, Mr. Nash had found, and headline is, I believe it came from Fast Company, or is it Inc?
Inc.
I think it's Inc.
Fast Company did one, and this was from Inc. magazine, yeah.
Inc. magazine. The headline is, why so many companies are firing Gen Z employees. And I was a little surprised about it. And then as I started reading it, I thought, it doesn't sound all that much different maybe than from what other generations have gone through. But it says that Gen Z's entrance into the marketplace hasn't been entirely smooth. Roughly 60% of companies have cut Gen Z employees that they hired this year, which I thought was quite high. And they said this was according to an education and career platform called Intelligent. Of the 966 businesses surveyed, 75% said that the young workers had unsatisfactory performance. And they said that 50% said they lacked motivation, 46% said they lacked professionalism, and 39% said they had poor communication skills. I totally agree on the poor communication skills. Their heads and minds always seem to be in some sort of tablet or phone. Mm-hmm. And so they talked about how, is this just similar to what all generations go through when they get into the workplace and what their expectations are? They probably said that about us in the 80s. Or is this really something different? And they talked about things of exploiting new talent, and it's cheaper to hire younger people and more disposable, blah, blah, blah. But then later on in the article, it does talk about the importance of working hard and being in person, which would help you get ahead, which you and I have done many stories about, this hybrid working environment or remote working environment that people want. But in some ways, you're out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah, and the thing about this article that I found intriguing was, millennials had the same problems coming into the workforce. They are now hiring. They're now managerial C-suite themselves. They've moved up the ladder. But there was nuance when they interviewed some of these younger workers. And what they said resonated with you and me, I think, or would resonate, is that imagine joining a company, working for 2 or 3 years, and then being shown the door because sales were down or something. So there's a bit of a disenchantment with corporate America going on as well, which may explain why they don't quite care about, motivation. So if you go back to those stats at the beginning, they lack motivation, professionalism, and communication skills. So communication skills could be tackled by managers working with the younger workers to just kind of bring them up to speed on what the proper form would be. Like, don't email, call somebody, walk over. But motivation and professionalism go hand in hand with how they see people being treated by the companies they work for, right? So if you're somewhere for a while and then you get canned, you're like, okay, so why should I be motivated? Shouldn't I just have one hand tied behind my back and do my best and get my check and move on, right?
Right. Yeah,
And then there's work-life balance. This is a generation that has, a very different perception of time off and time on, and work is blended into what they do anyway because it's all computer and phone, and I'll answer that email right now. It's 11 at night. I think there's a lot going on here. And if this article had simply focused on the communication skills, I wonder what would have come out in terms of interviewing and research on that alone.
Yeah, because when they talked about the work-life balance in particular that you mentioned, where they felt that after 5 p.m. the time was theirs. But from when you started and I started in the workforce in the 80s, you stayed until you got it done, or you stayed to work harder to make sure it got done. And they actually did point to a kid named Abdullah here that talked about that very thing to say, you might want to leave at 5 p.m., but if you really want to get ahead, this whole social media world that they said, which they believe has misled his generation, that you're going to have some $1 million vacations and weddings on Lake Como, you have to have given up an awful lot earlier on in your career of having no life-work balance in order to achieve that sort of level of either money or success,
status or stature,
right?
And in fact, in that next paragraph, it says he's not focused. The guy you mentioned, Abdallah, he's not focused on having the perfect work-life balance because his perspective as an early career 20-something is that you don't have a lot of skills, but you have a lot of time.
Right.
With that time, he's focused on making a name for himself. He preaches that sentiment to his followers. You have to prove yourself. And so then it goes into this idea that you and I talk about. You just said it earlier when we started addressing this article about being seen, right? So he says showcasing that hustle mentality is hard to do from home, right? Which is a hurdle that Gen Z is struggling to get over.
Yeah, because they want to have hybrid remote work, a work situation, which, yeah, you may have that, but again, it goes to the out of sight, out of mind.
And he talks about connections too. He said, I don't recommend remote work for people who are just starting their career because it's very difficult to build connections. And you and I know those connections are simple things. A comment after a meeting, someone stops by your desk, you both like the same TV show and you connect on that level. And that could be a boss or a manager as well. And that makes a huge difference, right?
Yeah. At the very end, which I thought was probably the biggest takeaway for me, it says that Gen Z is essentially coping with its introduction into the corporate workforce. What's different is the Gen Z generation was raised to be change thinkers or change makers, influencing the way businesses think about responsibility, diversity, climate change, and so forth. And they said they want to make that change to work culture too. They said, but they also need to understand how they have to adapt to the new environment. He says, I think Gen Z wants to come in and play the game exactly the way they want to play it. And sometimes, however, if you're coming into the game where a bunch of people are already playing, you've got to play that way first or their way first. And so that's just really typical of any of us when you start a new job. You got to see the lay of the land, right? What's the culture? What's going on here? How do I navigate this? And yes, you're going to think maybe some of the workers you work with are dinosaurs, or they don't get it, or they're old school, or they're boomers, as we've heard many times. But I'm constantly surprised, even when I've gone to networking things with my college. And you can definitely see that people up until, I would say, 2003, 2005, are all standing around clustered in little groups at the bar, whatever, sitting at tables talking. And the grads that were from 2009 are looking at their phones constantly or off in a corner doing something. And maybe it's just the way it is, I guess. But you and I noticed that when you and I had been going to bars in Vegas. That, you walk into a bar and you and I are like, why is you and I are looking around to see who's, what's going on, what's happening inside, what's the vibe. And people are, I guess, texting each other within the bar on apps.
Well, and the bartender told us that. He said, "Oh, they're all on their apps." We're like, "But we're here. We're physical."
Walk up to someone, say hello, right?
Rolled his eyes. Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned, you touched on at the very end of the article, was they have these expectations about the environment they work in, notably environmental awareness. I'm guessing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Yeah. So imagine being a Gen Z worker and working for a company, and as we've seen, and you and I have profiled in some of our shows these past several weeks, companies dropping or rolling back their DEI initiatives. Now you're working for a company that you're not entirely sure actually represents you, and then that's a kind of a weird thing. Like, do they have to represent me? It's a job. I'm making money. Like it's a whole. I don't think you and I cared about that in our early careers. Did you?
It wasn't on the radar. You didn't go somewhere and say, "Oh, I wonder if they're gonna." Yeah, I don't know what you would have thought.
If they're supporting wildlife, or they do, whatever.
Supporting wildlife, or I'm going to get promoted because I'm not married, or I'm going to. Yeah, I was thinking, you were funny. I was thinking about the same thing. I don't think any of that was on the radar other than the health of the company. I remember I had an economics professor that when I had 2 job offers out of college, and he told me which one to take, and I didn't take it, which I should have.
What was the one you didn't take?
So I was offered a PR job in Washington, D.C. It was for they specialized in public relations with government.
Fascinating. Okay.
Government entities, and
he knew you well, by the way. That would have suited you.
That was my major, and then I got a job from the LTV Steel Company, which was selling high fragmentation metals to the military, and
you did have a good run there and some great stories.
But I was, the job offer in D.C. gives us 1985. Job offer in D.C. was $13,000.
Oh.
And the job offer with the steel company came with a car, and you and I had college loans to pay. Came with a car, and it paid $26,000.
Yeah.
So I went for the money. In retrospect, should have done the PR probably, but I went for the money. So
I'm not so sure. The decision tree that you just outlined, loans, living expenses, loans. You made the decision that was necessary at the time.
Right.
And then the one thing we didn't talk about with this article, which they didn't touch on per se with Gen Z, was this expectation of being accepted in the workplace. I'm surprised they didn't actually go into that, because Gen Z has a far higher a radar and awareness of LGBTQ issues and gender issues. But again, you and I chose industries like going into LTV. That was interesting because PR would have been a little more forgiving if you had revealed your orientation, if you know what I mean. Like me, art direction and creative direction. Oh, you're not gay?
Yeah, but that still wasn't even a thing
no.
then either.
That was something you had to navigate. That was your personal brand that you had to navigate, right?
Yeah, there was just nothing. I mean, I think back to my first years in the steel company, and it was. I certainly would have handled it much differently as an older person. I think the people they put in for those jobs were far too young to understand what they were doing. Or, here I was selling millions of dollars worth of steel to, someone who's making, helicopters or chain companies or something. I had no concept of really what that was.
Where the material,
when I think about it, or how you navigate lunches and business lunches and all that sort of thing. But I think somebody who had 10 years in the workforce probably would have been better at that sort of job, dealing with purchases that sophisticated and that high. But
I don't know. I still think you did a great job, and look at all the stuff you learned along the way, right?
Yeah, no, I did learn a lot. I certainly learned a lot.
I did. I know in my early jobs, man, and a lot of what I learned was not necessarily how to do the job, because I knew how to do that. What I learned was exactly what you were talking about: navigating a business lunch, how to be polite, how to communicate effectively with people, how to get someone on board with your point of view, all that stuff.
I remember one day, I didn't have enough. We had to wear a suit and tie every day,
yep.
Right? So I didn't have enough. I didn't have enough money for a suit every day. So one day I show up in khakis and a blue blazer, and I still remember the head of the office, the guy named Mr. Stitt, looks at me and he cocks his head and goes, "You going to the ball game today?" I was like, what? He goes, you going to the ball game today?
Ball game. Love that.
And I was like, no. He's, oh. And then I'm
your
thinking,
dress?
oh, it must be my outfit. And then another time, I guess my hair was getting a little shaggy. He goes, have you found a barber in town?
It's like my second boss, Judy. I had an earring in one ear. You know, you could hang a Christmas tree in that ear at the holiday time. That earring came out so fast. Yeah, when I worked for the magazine Avenue, and I remember the fashion editor used to take me aside. I think her name was Randy, and she's like, John, and she would point out things that I should be looking at, like a certain kind of suit or pants, But that's, when I look back on it, that was the learning that you did, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
there was a woman that I will say, this is one of my favorite stories, was just a quick one, is I got my first paycheck. You're getting your paycheck, and people would go to the bank, right? You go deposit your check. And I didn't have a bank in Philadelphia. So I went to all these different banks. Nobody would cash my check. I had no history of anything. I didn't have didn't have residence, hadn't established residence. So this woman, she was older woman in her 40s, divorcee. You could just imagine, central casting. And she goes, honey, I'll take you during lunch. We'll go get this check cashed. I said, okay. So we go into the Philadelphia National Bank, and she says, now we're not going to go up to the teller and waste our time. We're going to go right to the manager of the bank. So she sets us up, and we're sitting at the guy's desk. She goes, I've got this young man here, young professional here, has just started, and he needs to get this check cashed, and he needs to open an account and establish, a bank account. So he looks at the check and goes, I've never heard of this company, the LTV Steel Company. She looks at him, deadpan, right in his face, and goes, did you ever hear of the fucking space shuttle? And he just looks at her, and she goes, because we built it. She goes, matter of fact, we probably built all the steel girders holding up this place. She goes, we're the second largest producer of steel in the world. What do you mean you haven't heard of it? And she grabs the check out of his hand. She goes, come on, we'll go across the street to another bank.
And did it work?
No, I ended up having to go to some little bohunk, little bank in New Jersey that was a little independent bank that finally would take the check. It was horrible. I went to First Pennsylvania Bank, PNC Bank, Meridian Bank, all these banks, nobody would cash this check. Anyway, but I still remember that line when she looks at him.
Have you heard of the space shuttle?
She's got, hand on the hip. She leans into him. She's got this red cinnamon-colored hair, short bob with the glasses, divorcee. Did you ever hear of the fucking space shuttle? There's dead silence. I'm like, oh, my God. Grabs a check, off we go.
So this just proves that I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change a lot. There's nothing I would change, because these stories are just, you could have taken the PR thing in DC, but instead you did this, and now you have this story about going to the bank and the hand on the.
Yeah. So anyway,
all right, folks, we're going to wrap it up.
Who do we got
there.
next week, John?
We have a special guest joining us next week. Aunt Barbara, your Aunt Barbara, Tupperware maven and saleswoman supreme, will be joining us to talk about Tupperware's restructuring, actually, because they announced a Chapter 11 restructuring. Doesn't mean they're going out of business. It means they're just getting their house in order. And it was a pre-record. We met with Aunt Barbara. You're going to enjoy that. I was trained never to say things like that. Just tune in. You'll like it.
Tune in.
Yeah. So we want to thank our partner here, Deep Discount, on the Focus Group. They've been with us from the very start. You go to our site, focusgroupradio.com. Besides learning about Deep Discount, which you click on their logo and start shopping, you'll learn about us there as well. Again, tune in next week on the Focus Group. We'll have Aunt Barbara joining us for Shop Talk. I always have to get ready for when she comes, because I smile and laugh so much the back of my head hurts after a while, and it's always the case with Aunt Barbara. All right, so everybody, please be safe out there. We like to say, don't text and drive, arrive alive. I see crazy. I still see it. But anyway, they're not our listeners, clearly. The ones that are driving poorly, Tim, they are not our listeners. Everybody, please stay safe. We'll see you next week here on the Focus Group.
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.